Hi, this is Allison Grant Lunes from Profiles in Franceformation, and today I want to talk about episode 2, our guest Morgan Walesh, who runs the Facebook page Paris History of Our Streets. And so during these bonus episodes, what I'm going to do is talk you through some of the administrative challenges faced by our guests and kind of how you can navigate them if they're issues that you're currently facing, and to give you a bit of insight about their visa path or the different administrative procedures that they've gone through. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about in this bonus episode. So Morgane talks about how she came to Paris as a student studying French, and she had a relatively low level of French when she arrived. Now, she talked about, she said on her application that she had a B1 or a B2, but we didn't actually say what her level was, only that she was unpleasantly surprised when she arrived and realized that her level was not quite as high as she thought. Now, part of that obviously is, the challenge of when you arrive in a new country, and when you arrive in France, even if you've been learning French, um, actually using the French in context can be a very different experience from the academic French that you were used to using in your French classes back home. So everybody who moves to France, and I had a similar experience where, I had theoretically a master's level of French from the French language programs I had done in the US, but didn't know how to say a lot of the useful stuff like, you know, where can I plug in my telephone? And how do I file a claim with my renter's insurance for the flood coming from my neighbor's bathroom upstairs? And so those are the kind of language challenges that you'll have to learn in situation when you're actually here, in addition to whatever language classes that you're doing to, teach you things like grammar and verb tenses and increase your vocabulary and things like that. So Morgane came in 2012 as a student for studying French. And unfortunately, that path is not so much available to people who want to come to France today. It used to be relatively straightforward to get a student visa, even if you were enrolling in French classes in a full-time program of French classes. Unfortunately, they have kind of tightened the restrictions, and now people who are enrolling in language programs are more likely to get a temporary stay visa that is not renewable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about if you're enrolling in a French language program because you want to learn French and you may eventually want to pursue your studies in France, what you can do to increase your chances of getting a student visa. But unfortunately, it's not really a as foolproof of a method as when I first started guiding people in the student visa process. So, if you want to get a student visa, you need to be enrolled in a full-time program of study with courses in person in an accredited university. Now, a full-time academic program is 20 hours per week for the duration of the school year, and you can't have more than a 2-week break between classes. So you can take vacations. You can have the normal. You can have the normal vacations that most French students have, which is roughly 2 weeks every 6 to 8 weeks. The vacation schedule, published online by Éducation Nationale, is followed pretty much by the universities. Most universities and academic programs are closed for at least part of August and for the 2 weeks around Christmas. So you don't have to be, 20 hours per week every single week, but you do have to have a certain number of credit hours for the academic year. You want to enroll in a program with a FLE quality label, so FLE or Français Langue Étrangère quality label, and preferably an actual university program like the Sorbonne's Cours de Civilisation Française or the Institut Catholique. So you want to avoid the cheap language schools that have large class sizes. And unfortunately, most of the people or a lot of the people who are enrolling in those classes want an easy way to get a student visa, and they aren't necessarily committed to actually learning the language, and the quality of the education isn't necessarily going to be the same. The other challenge of some of those cheaper language programs or the programs that enroll on a week by week basis, on a rolling basis, is that there's a lot of turnover in the classes. And so it can be difficult to maintain a certain level in the class when you constantly have people arriving and people leaving, um, and the teacher is constantly having to get to integrate new people into the class. So ideally, you'll want to be going for a full year academic program in a university context or setting. And there are some that are less expensive than the Sorbonne. I'm just citing that one as an example. But other universities offer similar programs that cost less money and that would still be a good criteria for getting a student visa. If you have an A1 level of French and you have never taken French before, uh, it would be a good idea to start taking French before you come and to have a solid reason for continuing your French classes in France before that relate to how you're going to pursue your career or your education. So if you've never taken French before, and you're starting from scratch, it's going to be very difficult to get a student visa. If you have a slightly higher level of French and you are planning to enroll in programs of higher education later on in your academic career, you have a better chance of getting a visa that will enable you to enroll in university programs afterwards. Now, before you even do any of this and look for language programs, you do want to look at the requirements of the country where you're living. So, not all countries have an agreement that will allow the issuing student visas to language school students. So, I was working with a client in Australia several years ago, and she had kept postponing her move to France because she wanted to save money, and she was older. She was in her late 30s, so she was too old to be an au pair. But her plan was to kind of come on a student visa that would enable her to work part time while she improved her language level and then would be able to enroll in a university program. And unfortunately, during the time that she was saving up this money and postponing her move to France, the French embassy in Australia changed the rules of issuing student visas and would no longer issue student visas for language programs of any kind. And so, some countries, unfortunately, are like that, and you want to check the rules um, before you come. Uh, Now, there are different processes for getting a student visa depending on what country you're applying from. Now, I'm going to talk about the United States, which has to go through a procedure on Campus France. And Campus France is sort of an evaluation website where you can apply to universities through the Campus France portal if you're applying to university programs, or if the programs are not on the Campus France portal, you can apply to them directly, but still have to get approval from Campus France. And Campus France usually will call you to interview you to just talk about, what are your reasons for applying for a student visa? Why do you want to learn French? Why do you want to pursue this particular academic program? And they're going to see and kind of evaluate the seriousness of your profile and whether or not, you deserve to get a student visa. And so it's kind of a way for them to evaluate who's serious about getting a student visa and following their education in France, and who is just trying to get a student visa to come to France for other reasons. And they're really cracking down on people who have been coming to France to get, just to come to France and using the studies as an excuse. So when you go through, whether you go through the Campus France process or whether you go through your local French consulate and just have to provide your documents directly to as part of the visa application, in all cases, it's a good idea to provide sort of a statement of purpose and a cover letter. You'll have to provide your academic transcripts for any previous academic programs, and you'll also want to provide, a resume or cover letter and just kind of explaining why you want to go to France and how it fits into your career plans. So if you have a relatively advanced education, and there's no obvious reason why learning French would be particularly useful to you, or why a particular educational program would be useful to you, you're going to have a bit of a difficult time justifying the fact that you're getting a student visa instead of applying for some kind of work visa um, or jobs in France or things like that. So just be aware that, student visas seem like they should be a very easy visa type to get. And in fact, that used to be the case. But there's really been a shift in the past 8 years that I've been working on visas and working with students, that has made it much more difficult to to get a student visa for France. Now, um, if you are going to write a cover letter and a statement for why learning French or why enrolling in a particular academic program fits into your career goals, um, it would also be a great idea to cite, maybe other French programs that you researched in French universities that you want to apply for after getting the particular level of French that you need in order to successfully enroll in those programs and things like that. So there are ways where you can show the seriousness of uh, your desire to learn French and where your career might go uh, when your language skills improve. One of the reasons it's become so difficult to get a student visa, especially for learning French, is because coming as a student can be a great stepping stone to getting an internship, to getting a job in France, and to finding a path to permanent residency. So it's one of those ways of moving to France where the burden of proof of resources is relatively low. It's about 650 euros per month in cash for the duration of your stay, aside from tuition for your school program. And um, after being a student for several years and after earning a degree in a French university, you have the opportunity to switch more easily uh, to work in France. And so jobs can sponsor you more easily without having to prove they tried to hire a French or EU citizen. And after earning a degree and spending 2 years, in French higher education, earning a degree from a French university, you have what's called the situation de l'emploi non opposable, which means that direct cannot prevent a company from hiring you to work in your field. Um, so they cannot prevent a company from sponsoring you once you graduate and get a diploma from a French university. And you also, at the end of a 2-year degree program, you also have a job called a visa type called recherche d'emploi, which then enables you to spend 1 year maintaining the student status without being enrolled in a university program while you're seeking full-time employment. And so it can be a great path to getting a job in France that's sponsored and to eventually getting residency and naturalization. Now, one of the things that you should know is that in order to ultimately get residency and naturalization, you do have to switch from a student visa to another visa type. So even if you've been in France for 5 years as a student, you're not going to be able to get naturalized on that basis. And in my last bonus episode with Harriet Welty Rochefort, I talked about naturalization as a French citizen, and I talked a little bit about the criteria for being naturalized, which the main things they're going to look at, aside from the amount of time that you've spent in France, are, are you relatively integrated into French society, and are you financially stable? And financially stable usually means that you are in a long-term work contract, a CDI, you're outside of your période d'essai, you're not on any type of unemployment. If you're self-employed, you've had consistent and stable revenues, and that those revenues, whether from your salaried job or your self-employment, exceed about 1.5 times the minimum wage in France. Minimum wage in France is just under 1,500 euros per month, so you're looking at about 2,300 euros of revenue per month in order to be considered financially stable. And if you don't meet those criteria, then they can adjourn you, which means they reject your application for the next 2 years. Basically, those criteria mean that as a student, you're not going to be eligible to apply for naturalization as a French citizen, or that you're not going to be approved if you do apply, just because it's fairly difficult, if not impossible, to actually become naturalized, or to have that level of income and to have a full-time, long-term work contract if you're not able to do so because of the constraints of a student visa. So Foolproof French Visas discusses all of these options and gives you a couple of different paths to coming to France as a student, the different programs that are offered, and the different paths you can take to residency or citizenship. after completing a program of study in France. It also goes over the Campus France process if you have to do that. But typically, as I mentioned, you want to be in an accredited French university in a degree program or in a serious language program that can lead to a degree program, because ultimately getting that French degree is going to facilitate your ability to stay in France. Now, one of the things Morgan talked about briefly is that after she was a student, she she did what she calls a visa switcheroo. And so we also didn't mention the type of visa that Morgan switched to, but I can tell you that right now and how she did it. So she had a student visa initially for 2 years, and then she got pregnant and she had a child with her partner. And as she talks about during the interview, they're not married. So she was not eligible for a visa as the spouse of a French citizen. If they had been paxed, and I don't actually know if they're paxed or not, if they're paxed, usually she would need to be paxed and living together for 1 year in France before she can hope to apply for a vie privée familiale visa, and that's in Paris. There are some other regions where they're slightly more difficult about getting you a vie privée visa for the PAX, because a PAX is just considered an élément d'appréciation in your application for a vie privée visa and does not give you the same rights as being married. So you will want to be careful if you're planning to apply for a vie privée visa as the partner of a French citizen, especially if you don't plan on getting married. But having a child who is French is also a valid way of getting a vie privée et familiale visa. There's a category of vie privée called parent d'un enfant mineur, and basically it allows the non-French parent of a child with French nationality to get a vie privée visa to live and work in France. And so you do not have to be married to the child's other parent. The child's other parent does not even have to be alive. I currently have one client who has a daughter with had a daughter with a French man and who sadly passed away. And she is in the process of converting her visitor visa to a vie privée et familiale visa as the parent of a French child. So in order to get this visa, the non-French parent has to prove a couple of things. One, that the child has been living regularly in France for 1 full year. So unfortunately, if you're not already living in France with the child, you would have to come on another type of visa, including possibly a visitor visa, for 1 year, be able to support yourself and support the child. And then after the end of that first year, when the child has been enrolled in school or in daycare or had a nanny, and you have ample proof of having lived together in France and been supporting the child, then you would be able to switch to this vie privée status again, even if the child's other parent, the child's French parent, is not involved. The other thing that you have to do is, as the non-French parent of a French child, you have to prove that you've been contributing to the child's education and, to their well-being. So things like receipts for food and health insurance and shelter, and testimonials from your friends and family saying you live with the child, you support the child, you care for the child. All of those things would enable you to get this vie privée visa. And so with that visa switch that Morgan did, that enabled her to stay in France long term and also to find part-time work. And so the final thing that I want to talk about is Morgan's job as a local recruit for the TAPIF program. So TAPIF is the teaching assistant program in France, which recruits native English speakers and native speakers of several other languages in similar programs. And these teachers are recruited internationally from multiple countries, including normally about 1,600 to 2,000 Americans per year. There are also several hundred who come from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc. So Morgan talks about how she has worked for them as a local recruit. So the program typically hires native English speakers, usually college graduates under the age of 30, um, to come and work in France for about 7 months as an English teacher in a French school. So the teachers can be placed in elementary, middle, or high schools anywhere in France, working about 12 hours a week, teaching about 12 hours a week. And the pay is about 800 euros per month after taxes. And that pay has not increased since I first did the job in 2007. One of the disadvantages of the program is, because the hours can be spaced out throughout the school week, and includes only teaching time, not preparation time, it can end up being the equivalent of a full-time job, even though, like, contractually, you only have about 12 hours a week. And the hours are organized, in conjunction with the school, depending on their schedule, with the principal and the teachers that you work with and things like that. So you really shouldn't plan on doing anything else or having any other income while you're in France for TAPIF. I did the program for 2 years. I did it in 2007, 2008, where I worked in Paris in the 11th in 2 elementary schools. And then when I returned to France in 2009, I did it for a second year in Drancy, which is actually where I met my husband. So I was fortunate in that I was able to get a student visa both times and to arrange the work around my schedule as a student, but they've made it much more difficult to do that and to get a student visa and actually do the TAPIF program. So I'm not sure that that is an advisable plan of action anymore, unfortunately. Now, um, and many, many Americans in France have done this program, and it's a great way to kind of get your foot in the door. Although, as I'm going to tell you, one of the disadvantages of TAPIF is that the contract is usually for 7 months, from October 1st through the end of April, and the visa is only a little bit longer than that. So, unfortunately, even if you renew your contract, for TAPIF, you're going to have to go home sometime in May and then come back in October with your new work contract and arrêté de nomination and all of those things. And also, it's just not really possible to renew or extend your visa for the language program after it ends. Another thing it's important to know is that it's impossible to switch from a language assistant visa to a student visa. So the TAPIF visa is a travailleur temporaire visa, which is a work visa type, and it is not possible to switch from a work visa to a student visa because it's considered going backwards. So every year there are dozens of students who come to me, who message me, who post on my Facebook group saying, I just did TAPIF. I don't want to go home to get a new visa. How can I switch my status here? Or I tried to switch my status at the prefecture and it got denied, but I don't want to go home. How can I avoid going home? And I want to tell you right now that you can't. You are going to have to go back to your home country at the end of TAPIF, apply for a new visa. TAPIF is very likely not going to count towards any kind of requirement for residency or naturalization because there's really no good way of extending your visa unless you find a wonderful job that will start a contract right at the end of TAPIF and sponsor you and enable you to renew a work visa status at the end of the program. Every year, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of students who, come and comment on those kinds of posts in my group. There's always one or two who succeed at their local prefecture and they're held up as examples for why I'm wrong. But I'll have you know that they're the exception that proves the rule, and that's a situation where somebody got very, very lucky and fell on and happened onto somebody who didn't really know what they were doing. So plan to go home. You may want to try it anyway, just to see if you're the lucky person of that year. But generally speaking, plan to spend the summer back in your home country if you do TAPIF and then go to school. One of the things about TAPIF is that you're not able to do any other kind of work if you're on the language assistant visa. And you also have very little say in where you're placed geographically. you can usually on the application identify certain regions or cities that interest you and whether you'd like to be in a large city or a small town. But honestly, you don't have much control at all over where you've ended up. And there's no longer really any way of providing proof of, living with family or being enrolled in a school program or having contacts in a certain area. You used to be able to provide proof of that, and they would try to place you in that region. But unfortunately, that's no longer the case. So that's if you want to apply for TAPIF and you are in your home country and not already living in France. Now, what Morgan talks about is being a local recruit. So if you're already living in France and you have the right to work, as Morgan does on her vie privée visa, you can apply to your local rectorat for a teacher position, and that will be anywhere in the académie. So there's, the Académie de Paris, there's the Académie de Créteil, which is to the north and east of Paris. There's the Académie de Versailles, which is the west and the south area of Paris. And then each major city or each region also has their own academy, and you can apply for a position through the administration of your academy or region for a job near you. And in that case, it's a local position and you will be placed somewhere in that region. The reason that they do this is that every year, some of the assistants that are hired by TAPIF end up not coming to France for whatever reason. So sometimes, they're applying for graduate school at the same time they're applying for TAPIF and they decide to go to school, or they get a different job or whatever. There are lots of reasons that between January when they apply and April when the decisions are made and October when they're supposed to show up in France, there are a lot of things that can happen between then. And so there are always some teachers or some assistants who are not able to fulfill those contracts and don't actually show up in France. So there are always some positions that need to be filled at the beginning of the academic year. And I'm sure that, in this year, for example, there were many because of the delays in COVID-related travel and things like that throughout the spring and summer. So TAPIF teaching contracts usually run from October 1st through the end of April. They can be at any level, elementary, middle, or high school. And the application deadline is usually around January 15th. So I haven't looked up the deadline for 2021 yet, but it will definitely be within the next several weeks for the academic year 2021 to 2022. And as part of the application process, you'll need a recommendation from a language teacher about your level of French. So if you want to apply from outside of France, you want to make sure that you're looking into that possibility relatively soon after listening to this episode or watching this video. And if you're already in France and want to be a part-time English teacher, those positions typically will become available sometime in August to early to mid-October when visas start being issued and teaching assistants start showing up or not, or making it known that they're not going to be able to take the position. So that's around the time of year when the rectorat will know how many positions they're going to have available, and they'll start pulling from the list of applications that they've received for these local recruit jobs. So if you want to come to France to teach English, this TAPIF can be a really great way to spend a few months in France on a work visa, work in a French school, get relatively integrated into French society, and maybe even discover a region or a city that you might not have otherwise moved to. If you are already living in France, being a local recruit can be a great option if you want to teach English, you want to have a part-time job, you don't have particular restrictions on what type of job you're able to do, and you just kind of want something to supplement your income or to to give you a little bit of income while, like Morgan, if you're caring for children, or you have other projects going on and you don't want to commit to a full-time position. The process of applying for TAPIF and other temporary language positions and their corresponding visas are, of course, all described in Foolproof French Visas, along with the student visa types that we talked about. So those are the administrative kind of situations that came up in Morgan's episode. There's a lot of great stuff there and a lot of great examples for young people who are planning or who would like to come to France, whether temporarily or for studying or for work. And so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something useful out of it, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye. Hey, this is Allison Grant Lunes. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you learned something about living in France and were inspired about pursuing your own Franceformation. Do you want to learn how you can get the right visa and create your dream life in France? Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and to the Profiles in Franceformation podcast for more inspiring stories about people who made their Franceformation a reality, and for more tips and tricks on how to make your Franceformation happen for you. If you want to learn more about what visa is right for you and how to pursue your Franceformation, you can check out my book, Foolproof French Visas, which goes over basically every single way that you can possibly move to France. It's available as an ebook or in paperback on Amazon, and it will help you identify the right visa for you and prepare a successful application. Or if you'd like my personal help with applying for your visa and moving to France, you can go to www.yourfranceformation.com/free-call to request a free 30-minute Franceformation clarity call with me about how I can help you to make your dream a reality and get started on helping you to move to France. Thanks again for watching, and à bientôt.